So, what are you planning to read for us today?
So, I'm actually going to read an excerpt from a book that is going to launch a brand new series. If you're familiar with me, then you know that I'm writing in one big world that I created, starting with the Clan Sinclair and then moving over to the Highland Ladies and the Highland Ladies Always. And then I came back to a second generation for the Clan Sinclair Legacy. This new series that I'm launching, House of Sutherland, is also second generation. It's the cousins that to the Clan Sinclair legacy. So we met the parents of these forthcoming heroes and heroines during the Highland Ladies. But this particular book is a prequel. So it's set about 50 years before House of Clan Sutherland will take place. But so many people ask me for Hamish and Amelia stories. So it just felt like the right time to give them their own story to launch this series. So this is Hamish and Amelia's story. And Hamish is at court to deal with a feud. And who does he fall for? His enemy's daughter, of course. So, needless to say, that did not start things smoothly.
Nice. Take it away. I'm excited.
Awesome. The next night passed with a mixture of bliss and torture for Amelia and Hamish. They walked together for the first 3 days while Kyla and Liam remained at court. Just as Kyla suggested, Amelia kept her company while Hamish and Liam spoke because Liam refused to let Kyla out of his sight at Stirling. He was a doting husband who trusted no one with his wife's safety but himself. Between being a former Sutherland and now a Sinclair, along with her beauty, Liam feared the type of attention Kyla would receive if left to navigate court alone. She wasn't well versed yet in the duplicity of courtly society. Once those first few days ended, it became harder for Hamish and Amelia to have time to talk. While the pair had walked with the Sinclair couple, they'd all spoken as equals. The men valued the women's opinions, and the women appreciated being listened to. After the Sinclairs left, the Queen insisted upon Amelia always walking with the other ladies in waiting. So the first 2 mornings, Queen Isabella excluded Hamish from the walk altogether. But for the last 2 mornings, he and Amelia happened to meet near the doors before the other women joined them after the morning meal. They led the way outside and into the gardens, which forced the Queen to accept Hamish's company, even if she made it clear he was unwelcome. It was at the end of one of their walks when Hamish noticed the undercroft in the shade. He wondered if he might convince Amelia to steal a few moments alone with him. I must visit the Fletcher before the upcoming hunt, Hamish stated, apropos of nothing during a rare lull in their conversation. I wonder if he will be busy. If you go soon, you can catch him after the men finish at the targets, but before the midday meal. But be brave. He is none keen to miss any meals. I've seen him. I know what you mean. Hamish racked his mind for a reason for her to go with him, or to meet him in the undercroft afterward. It wouldn't matter if he didn't go to the Fletcher at all. Would you care to see the falconry? I ken it's near the Fletcher. Amelia looked in the direction in which the arrow maker and the hunting birds lay. She realized their route would take them past the undercroft with its cool and dim spaces no one would visit during late morning. She glanced up at Hamish. Aye, I would. Can you walk there with me, or would you have to meet me? Hamish ensured his words wouldn't carry on the light breeze that lifted the hair from Amelia's shoulders in a tantalizing wave. I can meet you there. I can't tarry for too long, but I will find an excuse, Amelia answered as they and the rest of the Queen's entourage reached the end of the gardens. She whispered, Give me 5 minutes. Hamish turned to face her and offered her his hand, as had become their routine at the end of their walks. Amelia rested her palm in his before he brought the back to his lips. He brushed his against the smooth skin as his thumb stroked hers, but it only lasted a couple heartbeats before he let her go. He bowed as the Queen passed them, and Amelia fell into line with the fellow ladies. He watched them go into the keep before he hurried to the Fletcher. He would use the few minutes he had to check on the order of new arrows he'd placed. He would attach his own feathers to the end, being very particular about them. But he knew the man's expert craftsmanship for the wood projectiles. He paid and gathered his quiver before slipping into the undercroft. He stood beneath an archway, out of sight, but where he could spy Amelia. Leah, Hamish whispered. She was looking for him when she appeared to stroll by, but he already knew her well enough to tell it was her purposeful walk that was meant to fool people into thinking she merely glided from one place to another. He'd strolled with her many times in the garden and along the river bank where they went riding. He could tell the difference. She glanced around before joining him. They retreated into the shadows. This way, Amelia murmured. She took his hand without a second thought and led them into the area near the buttery. She scanned their surroundings until they reached a door to a storeroom she believed was empty. Wait, Hamish breathed. He shifted and pressed her to his far side. He eased the door open and peeked inside. The outside light was so dim it did little to illuminate the storage area, but he was certain there was no one inside. When they stepped in and he shut the door, it pitched them into darkness. A sole window near the ceiling did little to circulate the stifling air or allow light into the room with stacks of grain, but neither cared. They came together in a needy kiss that had no finesse, but all their unsatisfied longing for one another. Their hands roamed over the other's body, savoring each inch they discovered. Hamish dropped his quiver to the ground. He kept his sporran between them, worried his turgid length would frighten her. If only he'd known how much she longed to discover what lay behind it. But Amelia was too timid to suggest anything or move it herself. She feared what he would think of her brazenness, even if he seemed to enjoy her eagerness. Soon mere kisses weren't enough. Hamish lifted her and she wrapped her legs around him, grateful her full skirts allowed her the room to do that. He'd spied a table while the light was behind him. He could see its vague outline as he moved toward it, careful not to bump into it when he got close. He placed Amelia on the flat surface as they continued to kiss. He moved without haste as he drew her skirts up to her ankles. When she didn't protest, he bared her calves and slipped his hands around the muscled flesh. Amelia's legs wrapped around Hamish's as his hands ran up her thighs. When he grasped them, she tried to pull herself closer. She clutched his lenya and arched her back. She cupped his neck, then his jaw. She ran her fingers through his hair and down his back. His palms inched up her thighs until he reached her hips. He pulled her to the edge of the table, but his sporran finally irritated them both too much. He pushed it around his waist, allowing his sword to press against her sheath. It was the first time she'd felt a man's arousal pressed to her mount. Amelia's moan was nearly his undoing. Do you ken what it means? Hamish was unaware of how much Amelia knew about how couples came together. I ken what it means, Amelia assured him. As though speaking to one another silently, Amelia leaned back at the same time Hamish leaned forward until her shoulders brushed the tabletop. He lifted her hips so he could notch his rod at her entrance. If they had no clothes between them, he would have thrust and entered her, claimed her. Instead, they moved together just as they would one day when they could finally join as one. His fingers bit into her flesh until he worried he would leave marks. When he eased his hold, Amelia's hands flew to his through the clothing that separated them, pressing his fingertips deeper. I'll leave marks your maid will recognize, Hamish whispered. She prepares my bath, but she does not help me with it. It wouldn't have caused suspicion if she only saw me in my chemise for a few days. I would ken they're there, though. I would see them. Amelia felt his breath beside her ear when he whispered. Now it tickled her neck as he kissed along it, tightening his grip as he did. She let go of her hesitation and gathered his plaid over his backside. She sat up as best she could while he continued to kiss her neck and shoulder. Her hands grasped his chiseled behind. She'd felt nothing like it. When she squeezed, she felt his rod jerk. She didn't know why he groaned, then froze. She feared she'd done something wrong. But he was soon moving against her as he had before. It ignited need unlike anything she'd felt before. She ached, but she didn't know what to do to ease it. She didn't know what to ask for or what to tell Hamish to do. In turn, Hamish appreciated the darkness since Amelia couldn't see how his cheeks heated. The moment she'd grabbed his backside and pressed him tighter against his mound, he'd lost control and spent himself. He feared she would know why his cock jerked between them, but she made no sign that she understood what had just happened, that he hadn't shocked her, and that she hadn't recoiled in horror or amusement, made him even hungrier for more of her. While he might have found his release, he was unconvinced he should take their interlude far enough for him to bring her to climax. He wanted to offer the relief and pleasure he'd found, but he didn't want to ruin the moment by doing something she didn't want or that might scare her. They continued to move together, kissing and touching, until voices floated to them outside the storeroom. They froze, both looking toward the door. Whomever was outside passed close enough for them to hear footsteps. It was a bucket of frigid water. It reminded them of all they risked if they were found together. It would force them to marry, but not with the respect they believed their partner deserved. Neither worried for their own reputation, but that of the person they were growing to love. Hamish stepped back, his ardor cooled from the interruption and his no longer aching buttocks. He helped Amelia arrange her skirts, then eased her to her feet. They wrapped their arms around one another, neither ready to leave their little hideaway. After the lust came a moment of loving affection. The last kiss they shared was little more than a peck before Hamish gathered his quiver and they slipped out of the room to go in opposite directions. With the king's permission to court, neither the queen nor the mistress of the bedchamber, who oversaw the ladies in waiting, could deny Amelia time with Hamish in the afternoons. He went to the lists after his walk with Amelia, refreshed himself before the midday meal, and went riding with her after they'd eaten. They took a contingency of Ross and Sutherland guards, but Roy insisted Henrietta accompany them as a chaperone. She unsurprisingly proved to be a constant irritation to both Hamish and Amelia. She inserted herself into every conversation and often forced herself between them when they rode or walked. When Amelia wasn't looking but guards were, she'd smile coyly at Hamish and even winked. He attempted to pay her no attention, which was a challenge, since she liked to brush against him any chance she had. Amelia noticed everything Henrietta did. It infuriated her more than hurt her. She expected her cousin to disregard her feelings in everything. She always had since they were children. But her flagrant attempts to seduce Hamish were beyond the pale. Amelia didn't fear Hamish's intentions straying. It was the inconvenience of Henrietta always being present that led Amelia to thoughts of violence. She appreciated Hamish's tact when he maneuvered around Henrietta, figuratively and literally, and always came to her side. Henrietta was a skilled rider, but she hadn't spent as many hours in the saddle as Hamish, nor did she have the natural balance and strength Amelia possessed. Once Hamish realized this, he urged Amelia to race with him. They'd charge ahead, leaving Henrietta behind with 2 Ross guards. It was those times when Amelia felt freest and that Hamish believed her the loveliest. Her laughter and twinkling eyes beguiled him. "Will you join the hunt this evening?" Hamish wondered as they stood together beside a stream midway through the 3rd week of their courtship. They'd sneaked away to the storeroom almost every day since their first interlude, but they never carried things further than they had the first time. Both wanted far more, but neither felt comfortable admitting it. Hamish didn't want to frighten Amelia with the force of his ardor, and consequently Amelia feared being far too forceful if she asked for or did more. They were quietly driving each other mad with unspent lust. But it was more than that. Each day spent in each other's company and each touch and kiss became a way to show how deep their feelings grew. They spent as many hours together as they could, but it never felt enough. Their horses guzzled the chilly water as the couple held hands. They knew Henrietta wouldn't join them for at least 10 minutes, given her staid pace. "I dinna ken if I can. I'd like to." Amelia's wistful expression made Hamish committed to ensuring she rode out with him and the other hunters. He drew her in for a kiss as his free hand rested low on her back. His ring finger and little finger brushed against her bottom. He turned them so Amelia's back was to the stream. He risked her rejection and others spying them because they were in the open, but he slid his hand down to cup her behind. She leaned into him, pressing her breast to his chest. Les pushed the kiss to new heights each time they came together. He squeezed her backside as he released her hand. He skimmed up her ribs until it slipped between them to cup her breast. When she grew bolder with her kiss, he groaned. The sound surprised him since he hadn't intended to make one. After their first rendezvous in the storeroom and hearing people walk past, they were always careful to remain quiet. But he longed for her and he didn't mind letting her know the effect she had on him. She fisted his lanyard, holding him close lest he step back before she was ready to end the interlude. When they were breathless, their lips pulled away, but their bodies remained pressed together. "Leah, I ken we're in public, so I will na do more, but lass, the way you tempt me." He grinned and shook his head. Each kiss they shared, tucked away in the undercroft or along the stream when they stopped to water their horses, grew more passionate by the day. But it wasn't solely lust. It was far deeper than that. "And you didn't think you tempt me?" She'd never believed the notion women couldn't and shouldn't enjoy physical relations with men. She hadn't held out hope she would ever enjoy it, but Hamish's kisses promised more than she'd dreamed of when she'd considered marriage in the past. I hope I tempt you, Lannon. I hope I tempt you to want me in all the ways I want you. They hadn't spoken of their emotions toward one another, but Hamish could wait no longer to know if Amelia felt what he did. It worried him that she was inexperienced, so curiosity drove her. It worried him that she enjoyed his company but wasn't falling in love the way he was. In turn, Amelia secretly shared the same fears. Do you know, Ken, I'm attracted to you? Didn't my kisses tell you that? They do, but is it just, is that all? Hamish stumbled, then blurted his thoughts. Her hesitation was soul-crushing. Do you feel more? Hamish realized she feared he wanted her to admit her feelings, then wouldn't reciprocate. She feared being made a fool. A lot more, Leah. So much more. No one has ever made me feel important before. You ask how I'm doing and truly listen. It isn't done as a courtesy before speaking about yourself. You ask me about it. You ask me about things we've spoken about before. Nay, because you weren't listening and cannot remember. Just the opposite. You listen and you make me feel you care about what I say. I didn't think most women at court ever have this. What you say interests me, Hamish told her. But even when we aren't talking, I enjoy your company. It brings me peace to stand here at the stream with you and just look toward the Highlands. I enjoy seeing the excitement in your eyes when we race. Your patience with the banshee impresses me when I would like to do not more than throttle her. Hamish glanced over his shoulder, knowing Henrietta and the other guards would soon catch up. I am nae patient. I cannot kill her and have nae one notice. Amelia only partly jested. Her cousin had been particularly hideous that morning during the meal and their walk. She'd spoken to the other ladies, hinting Hamish used Amelia as an excuse to spend time with her instead of the other way around. She alluded to him preferring her over Amelia. She didn't think anyone believed Henrietta, but she didn't appreciate anyone listening in case it gave credence to the rumors Henrietta attempted to spread. She will not come on the hunt, will she? Amelia laughed derisively. Nay, it's one thing she cannot be the center of attention at. She kens the men will not take any notice of her when they can prove their manhood while taunting one another. Good. They stepped apart as they heard the approaching hoofbeats, but Hamish refused to let Amelia be out of his reach any time they stopped during the rides. He held her hand and turned so the two of them faced downstream. Henrietta had to be their chaperone, but she didn't have to be part of their conversation. He figured if they got a head start as she climbed down from her saddle, pride would keep her from chasing after them. Hamish, Henrietta called out. He pretended not to hear. Hamish! She veritably squawked his name. With a sigh and a glance down at Amelia, they turned around. Aye, can you check Miss Saddle? Something doesn't it feel right? Hamish shot a glance to one of his warriors. Guilt tugged at him, but he proceeded anyway. Gareth was a stable lad before he started training in the list. He kens far more than I do about tack and horses. It wasn't entirely true. The man was 5 years older than Hamish, so he started working before Hamish could. The extra time with horses was the only thing that justified the claim he knew more. Hamish had been tending his steed since he was 10 summers. There was little he didn't know about animals. But Hamish had already turned away. Amelia followed. His stride was long, so his pace wasn't faster than usual, but it forced Amelia to take 2 steps to his every one. She knew she looked as though she sprinted to keep up, but they were soon in a copse of trees that hid them from the others. Their kiss was hungry as they devoured one another again, admitting their feelings, then being interrupted left them even more unsatisfied than their brief daily trysts. Both of his hands cupped her backside after she pushed his sporran out of the way. She tilted her hips forward, wanting to rub herself against him. When he held her tight and rocked his hips, she thought she would lose her mind with need. She could think of nothing more than how she wanted more. Leah, it's just as well we aren't alone, otherwise I would ravish you. Mayhap it's the fresh air or being able to see you in the bright light, but I want you more than I ever have, and I dinna ken how that's possible. Is it ravishing if I want it just as much? Would you ravish me then? Och, aye, my duel. I canna hear you call me that enough, my ghoul. They both froze for a moment, gazes locked, before Hamish cupped her cheeks. I let that slip, but you are my love. I ken it hasn't been nearly long enough for most people to believe I feel it is more than infatuation, but I ken what I can. This isna fleeting. Amelia lifted her chin and offered him a soft kiss before responding. You are a Mohir. You are a Mohir because you have my heart. I would call you my heart in Gaelic or Scots, French or English. Any language speaks the truth. This isna fleeting for me either, Hamish. You and I both ken the moon is for everyone else to accept us. Even if we kenned each other years, there would still be things to discover about each other once we married. Either way, we will have to learn to live with each other. But how I feel will not change. Your wisdom is likely what I love most about you. He squeezed her backside with both hands. But I'm fond of the rest of you, too.